Hello, I'm Alexander Muscat. I teach into the Bachelor of Design Games program at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia, and I also develop and research games. Today I'm going to be discussing the development of a new course in video game level design at RMIT, which has run for a couple of years and had close to 100 students through it. I'll be discussing the challenges, the complications, and insights that I found creating this course. And this is also the first time I'm presenting it, so any feedback or questions would be welcomed. So let's begin. A game level can be defined as where much of the experience of gameplay exists or is contained. It's a physical area or space traveled through or interacted with. Now, level design can be defined as the process of constructing the experience that will be offered directly to the player, creating the player's moment-to-moment experiences of the game and much of its emotional context. Now, this focus on sequences of space and player experience differs with other disciplines of game development that intersect with level design, like environment art, which focuses on the creation of art assets and the setting the look and feel of a game environment through these visuals. Furthermore, level design is an area of game design and development that is influenced by many compounding factors, such as development tools, game engines, genres, mechanics, audience, and so on. At a practical level, the level designer sits somewhere in the mix of game development disciplines, often interfacing directly with the design through specific tools that engage with the game engine directly. Now, the level designer kind of acts as this material conduit between the player experience and then these unseen technical elements that make up the game. Now, because of these complexities, a level designer's goal and role is often defined by context, and therefore level design's not really easily learned. For this reason, much level design is often very specific to particular games and cultures. For example, how a level designer might teach and remix mechanics in a Mario level, or use tricky moves like the floating midair regrab if they were going to make a Kaizo Mario level. Or alternatively, in Counter-Strike, a designer might be considering things like movement and looking through the lens of sight lines and choke points, or at a more complex level, the idea of overlapping navigation loops. Now, because of this variance within the field, there has historically been much emphasis on teaching methods, software, tools, and techniques. And despite this being an era of more ubiquitous game development platforms, practices still vary significantly. Now, I can give you a personal example, which is the level design and development for my own small exploration game, World 4, which takes place over 4 simultaneous screens as you explore the game world. Now, it was made in the Unity engine, but its level was designed in Blender 3D modeling software package to overcome Unity's famously bad level creation tools. However, all the logic and implementation and testing of the level is done in Unity, so there is this kind of loop of development and design. Now, alternatively, I could be using many other different 3D modeling packages, each with their own quirks, or I could be using one of the Unity platform's many level design tool plugins that also have their own characteristics. For example, Chisel here specifically aims at emulating level design methods found in older game engines and older game editors. This is something that Unity lacks. Now, Chisel and World 4 is one of many multidisciplinary approaches and solutions a level designer might adopt when tackling the design and development of a level for a game. Now, because of this, there are a few guiding or universally accepted texts or approaches in level design. And although there has been a growth in consumer-oriented tools like Mario Maker and Dreams, which raise other issues, there remains significant technical and cultural barriers. This, of course, raises challenges for game educators, specifically what can be considered appropriate or suitable when teaching level design concepts and techniques. So through his own course, Robert Yang has identified many challenges that face educators, which include difficulties in keeping relevance to industry, relevance to changes in game and game-making cultures at large, and also student interest. In addition, there are, of course, institutional factors that can include software access or integration and knowledge transfer with other programs or courses at an institute. Now, when developing the course, additional context came into play. In particular, we're based in Melbourne, Australia, and the games industry here is mostly made up of small studios where much development is multidisciplinary. So somebody doing level design will be doing other roles. In addition, there were also specific course conditions, most significantly that students would have mixed background, ranging from 0 to some experience in game design and development. Now, this informed a basic criteria that this course I was kind of designing had to be introductory, there couldn't be programming or modeling prerequisites, and there had to be a reduced technical learning curve. So, when constructing my approach, I looked at as many examples as I could find and were publicly available, different syllabus, exercise examples, and so on. I found there was often a focus towards technical depth in a development platform, and focus towards specific game genres and types of workflows, particularly multiplayer first-person shooters. Alternatively, I found quite a few approaches that forgoed computers for paper-based prototyping, working across multiple game types like RPG, strategy games, puzzles, and so on. I also reviewed a wide variety of games with level-making tools and found there's not only a tendency towards platformers and first-person shooters, but there was often barriers to entry, such as setup, user interface, mixed documentation, entry cost, and so on. What these did have, though, was very dedicated and active communities of level creators and tool makers who would collaborate and share their work together. So with these 3 points in mind, I found these actually linked back and spoke to these contextual factors, such as the idea of deeply localized and embedded game knowledge, and then also specific material approaches. These then informed some guiding principles for the level design syllabus I created for this course, which is to be based in technology, but don't make it a focus, engage different specific contexts, and also involve different communities, and kind of look into what knowledge and resources they have. So the syllabus consisted of predominantly 3 projects across different genres to engage students in different approaches and ways of thinking about level design. Each would be part of a historic walkthrough of different ways of thinking about game levels and game forms that would increase in complexity. This would begin with challenge and skill-based platformers using Mega Man Maker, social multiplayer first-person shooters using Quake and Trench Broom, and then also turning the FPS on its head and looking at exploration-focused first-person walking simulators in Unity. Now, each would involve a different level-making community as a knowledge foundation and resource, such as Mega Man Maker's very rich wiki, forums, and then also community streamers who would critique levels, Quake's community tutorials, and also level repositories. And for walking simulators, looking at the variety of small-scale walking simulators on itch.io made by people like Kitty Horror Show, Connor Sherlock, and then utilizing a variety of community-made free tools that are often used by walking simulator makers, such as the first-person drifter character controller and many of the online resources and assets within the Unity platform. Now, to further guide each project, I decided on a creative brief for each that would be based around specific player experience concepts. These would be supported, of course, through readings and viewings as a theoretical foundation. Now, these concepts included the teaching of game mechanics, pacing and moment-to-moment variety within a level, competitive and social multiplayer through level layout and architecture, and provoking and guiding navigation and environmental storytelling. Now, each project would also include a thematic constraint to act as a creative prompt for students. So, for example, Mega Man Maker, we would use the creative prompt of adjective and adjective as the level's title. For instance, fast and slow or sticky and wet, that students would be given, actually be given a variety of them. They could choose, and that would kind of be a launching off point for what elements they would concentrate on when making their level and responding to the concepts the project was focusing on. Now, this became more and more open-ended per project, providing more creative freedom. However, there was a bit of pushback from students and subversion as well of the themes, games, and tools. And this was accommodated to allow students to develop their own sensibilities. In addition, each project would be tackled individually. However, there was always a strong emphasis on class collaboration. I think this is a very important thing, whether that be weekly play sessions, show and tell, feedback and playtesting exercises. All of this is part of a way of keeping student work visible and knowledge sharing active. In addition, students would also critique each other's work, although privately through a blind, anonymous critique. Now, in practice, this approach went very well with students. They took to the syllabus better than expected, although not without difficulties. So, it was very challenging, the turnaround of learning, creating game levels, and then jumping to another tool. And it also created a considerable extra teaching workload, creating supplemental materials and also being able to support students. In addition, there was a bit of resistance towards specific games and tools, especially Quake being visually unattractive and a first-person shooter. And there was also expressed anxiety from students that their work would not be at the standard of those level-making communities we would look at. However, there were some other outcomes that I observed. These included a high standard of work despite the difficulty in working across different tools and genres, the ability to identify, articulate, and demonstrate different level design concepts and techniques, as broad as they were, and also excitement among students in finding the boundaries of a game, a tool, or the thematic constraints they were given. There was also quite a lot of iterative design because of that sort of student feedback loop that was encouraged. So to finish off, I have a few final considerations to put forward if you were interested in adopting this approach, particularly in this idea of engaging with like localized level design. So it has advantages, which is there is a wealth of expert knowledge that is deeply embedded within these different game communities that can help involve students as well as involve you as an educator. It can also help highlight and develop a perspective towards the different historic and cultural relevance of tools and games, and also the intermingling between the two, which of course remains ever relevant. And also, by making these constraints, conceptual and creative thinking can be pushed. This isn't too different to mod making and the idea of making another game into something that it was originally not, which is a bit of a lost art in education. However, there's also a few things to keep in mind. One in particular is allowing students to push back in response to this specificity. So not all students will care about the games and tools that you are being engaged, and that's okay. It can lead to very interesting experimentation and tackling of concepts. However, you have to accommodate that through the syllabus and also through the assignment briefs as well. In addition, I also really encourage involving the classroom as the primary audience for level projects. While it is very much worthwhile engaging these expert communities, foregrounding student work first really helps set and keep class expectations at a much more reasonable level so students don't agonize about making the best, Quake, Mega Man, or Walking Simulator level possible, and instead think more about the criteria and the brief presented. So here are my references, and thank you all very much for listening to me. I hope it was interesting. I will see you later.